Iran-Iraq War, Dictators, Clerics, and Carnage. What do you get when a paranoid dictator with delusions of grandeur decides to take on a revolutionary cleric who believes God is his war general? And how did a war that was supposed to last a few weeks turn into an 8-year trench-slogging, gas-hurling, missile-launching nightmare that left over 1 million dead and changed the Middle East forever? Welcome to the Iran-Iraq War, a conflict so brutal, so bizarre, and so politically tangled that it makes Game of Thrones look like a neighborhood dispute over lawn care. If you think you know the Middle East, think again. This is the war that shaped everything that came after, from the Gulf War to the rise of modern sectarian tensions. Stay with us, because once you dive into this story, you won't want to come up for air. There was a sprawling empire called the Ottoman Empire, which stretched from the Balkans to the Arabian Peninsula. Founded around 1299 by Osman I, it lasted over 600 years and was the heavyweight champ of the Islamic world too. It was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire with Turks, Arabs, Kurds, Greeks, Armenians, and more. It ruled Iraq through 3 provinces: Mosul, north; Baghdad, center; and Basra, south. But by the end of World War I, the Ottomans were toast, defeated, partitioned, and humiliated. After WODY, the British took over the Ottoman provinces and said, "Let's make a country." So they stitched together Mosul, home to the Kurds, fiercely independent and mountainous; Baghdad, dominated by Sunni Arabs, who would become the ruling elite; Basra, populated by Shia Arabs, historically marginalized and suspicious of central authority. The only thing connecting these regions? The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and British imperial ambition for. To keep the peace, the Brits built up the Iraqi military as a kind of internal police force. But this Frankenstein state was unstable, and the military became the most powerful institution. Cue the coup parade. Iraq's 20th century was a soap opera of coups. The military kept overthrowing governments like it was a national sport. Then came the Ba'ath Party, a pan-Arab nationalist movement. In the 1950s and 60s, it gained traction, and one of its most ruthless members was a young man named Saddam Hussein VII. He started as a hitman for the party, rose through the ranks using violence, fear, and purges. By 1979, he was president of Iraq, having purged rivals in a televised bloodbath that would make Game of Thrones blush 9. Saddam had a dream: to make Iraq the leader of a pan-Arab superstate, destroy Israel, and rival the US and China. But first, he had to deal with a pesky neighbor, Iran. Iran had its own drama. In 1979, the Shah of Iran, a US-backed monarch, was overthrown in a revolution led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Khomeini was a Shia cleric who wanted to export Islamic revolution across the Middle East. He saw secular Arab regimes, like Saddam's, as corrupt puppets of the West. He called for Shia uprisings in Iraq, which terrified Saddam. Iran was now a Shia theocracy, while Iraq was a Sunni-dominated secular state. The ideological clash was inevitable. The Shatt al-Arab River, formed by the Tigris and Euphrates, was vital for Iraq's oil exports. In 1937, a treaty gave Iraq control. But in the 1970s, Iran flexed its muscles and took over. Iraq was dealing with Kurdish uprisings, and Iran was backing the rebels. Saddam had no choice but to sign the Algiers Agreement, 1975, giving Iran half the river in exchange for peace. Saddam never forgave this humiliation. Revenge was brewing. By 1980, Iran was in chaos after its revolution. Saddam saw an opportunity. He believed Iran was weak and fractured. He wanted to reclaim the Shatt al-Arab. He hoped to topple Khomeini and install a friendly regime. So on September 22, 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. Saddam expected a quick victory. What he got was 8 years of hell 10. Both sides were unprepared. Saddam had Soviet tanks and aircraft but poor training. Khomeini purged Iran's military and relied on religious zealots and human wave attacks. The war was brutal: trench warfare, like WWI, chemical weapons used by Iraq, child soldiers, and mass casualties. Iran had the population advantage, 38 million versus Iraq's 13 million. But Iraq had better logistics and international support from the US, USSR, France, and Arab states. By 1988, both countries were exhausted. Iran's economy was collapsing. Iraq launched successful counteroffensives. The UN brokered a ceasefire. Neither side gained territory. The war cost over 1 million lives and $1 trillion in damages. Saddam Hussein, ever the paranoid micromanager, had a secret weapon. Iranian radio signals. Turns out, Iran was sending a lot of military communications uncoded over open radio frequencies. It was like shouting your battle plans across the desert with a megaphone. Iraq's intelligence, with help from Western sources like the CIA, intercepted these signals. Saddam believed this gave him a crystal ball into Iran's plans. He thought Iran was so fractured post-revolution that no deep planning was needed. Just a swift kick and the whole regime would collapse. Spoiler alert. It didn't. Saddam wasn't just playing Risk, he had a vision. Topple Iran's regime to stop the Islamic Revolution from infecting Iraq's Shia population. Become the Gulf's top dog, replacing Egypt as the Arab world's leader. Reclaim the Shatt al-Arab River, Iraq's oil lifeline to the Persian Gulf. He thought it would be a short war, like a weekend getaway with tanks. On September 22, 1980, Iraq launched a preemptive airstrike on Iranian airfields. But instead of targeting aircraft and hangars, they focused on runways. The damage was minimal and quickly repaired. Iran's Air Force, equipped with US-made jets, maintained air superiority early on. Then came the ground invasion. 6 Iraqi divisions charging into Iran like 6 solo acts with no band coordination. The war was fought across 3 sectors. North, a small operation to protect Iraqi oil fields. Center, Iraq advanced to Meran, near the Zagros Mountains. South, the main thrust into Khuzestan, aiming to cut off Iran from the Shatt al-Arab and seize oil-rich territory. Iraq drew a line connecting Muzian, Susangard, Abadan, and Khorramshahr, but forgot to secure the main highway behind those towns. Oops, Iraq failed to seal off mountain passes from Tehran, allowing Iranian reinforcements to flow in. Coordinate their 6 divisions, each acted like it was starring in its own war movie. Capitalize on Iran's initial disarray due to Khomeini's purges of military professionals. Saddam's obsession with micromanaging the battlefield created a top-heavy command structure that slowed everything down. Khorramshahr became a meat grinder. Iraq's special forces suffered heavy casualties. These elite troops were irreplaceable, and Saddam knew it. By January 1981, he ordered generals to avoid risking elite units. But the battle was strategically pointless. Surrounding the city would have been smarter than storming it. Instead of collapsing, Iran declared the war a holy jihad. Khomeini rallied the nation, turning the invasion into a test of the revolution. Iran launched a counterattack in January 1981, during the wet season. Mud everywhere, tanks stuck, chaos. Iraqi forces crushed Iran's armor, which was never rebuilt due to diplomatic isolation. But the defeat strengthened Khomeini's grip. He blamed secular officers and leaned heavily on the Pasturan and Basij, militia units driven by religious zeal. Iran's new strategy, human wave attacks. Lightly armed volunteers, often teenagers, charged Iraqi defenses. They overwhelmed positions by sheer numbers and religious fervor. Some wore plastic keys to heaven around their necks. Saddam responded by ordering retreating troops to be shot, which led many to surrender instead. By spring 1982, Iraq was in trouble. Fighting across an 800-mile front drained resources. Artillery ammo was running low. The Soviets were mad. Saddam started the war without their blessing. Saddam had to buy weapons from Yugoslavia, China, Egypt, and even Greece. His war chest was nearly empty, and his dream of a quick victory was shattered. Iran launched operations like Undeniable Victory and Jerusalem Way. They retook Khorramshahr and pushed Iraq back to the border. Saddam's army shrank from 210,000 to 150,000. Aircraft dropped from 335 to 100. Iran changed its goal, not just expel Iraq but overthrow Saddam. Saddam went from conqueror to cornered. The war became a fight for survival. Saddam Hussein didn't start the war with chemical weapons, but he sure ended it with them. Initially hesitant, not for moral reasons mind you, but to avoid international backlash, Saddam eventually embraced chemical warfare, like a man who'd run out of other ideas. Mustard gas and nerve agents like taboon and sarin became his tools of choice. These weapons were devastating against Iran's human wave tactics, causing mass casualties and psychological trauma. Iraqi troops even targeted Iranian hospitals and civilian centers, with over 350 chemical attacks reported during the war. Saddam's logic? If you can't beat them with bullets, melt their morale with gas. When the front lines froze, Saddam turned his wrath skyward. Welcome to the War of the Cities. Iraq launched Scud missiles and air raids on Iranian cities like Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and Tabriz. Civilians were the targets. Saddam hoped to break Iranian morale and spark a counter-revolution against Khomeini. At one point, Iraq dropped 40 tons of explosives on Tehran in a week. Impressive? Not quite. The Allies dropped over 1 million tons on Germany in 1944. Still, the message was clear. Saddam would bomb anything to end this war. When land and air failed, Saddam took the fight to the sea. Iraq attacked Iranian oil tankers and terminals, especially Karg Island, using French-made Exocet missiles. Iran retaliated with speedboats, mines, and silkworm missiles, targeting Gulf shipping. Even neutral ships were hit, dragging the U.S. Navy into the conflict to protect Kuwaiti tankers in Operation Earnest Will 4. Saddam even risked attacking a U.S. warship, the USS Stark, killing 37 sailors. That's desperation with a side of diplomatic disaster. From 1982 onward, the war devolved into a World War I-style stalemate. Iran launched offensives like Operation Dawn using human wave attacks to breach Iraqi defenses. Saddam responded with chemical weapons and fortified zones stretching from Basra to Baghdad. Iran tried every angle to take Basra, north, south, direct assault, but failed each time. By 1985, the war was a grinding meat grinder, with Iran believing it was one battle away from victory. Spoiler, it wasn't. By 1986, Iraq had the upper hand, 4,000 tanks versus Iran's 1,000, 600 aircraft versus Iran's 60-80. Iran struggled to repair its Western-made jets, while Iraq's Soviet-supplied arsenal thrived. Saddam's elite Republican Guard became a mobile counterattack force, shifting between sectors to repel Iranian offensives. In winter 1985-86, Iran launched a surprise amphibious assault on the Fa Peninsula. 250,000 troops, with 150,000 used in the assault. They crossed rivers and lakes, catching Iraq off guard. Iraq's armored counterattack failed due to terrain and narrow roads. Khomeini believed this was the moment to topple Saddam. He was wrong. In January 1987, Iran launched Operation Karbala, aiming to end the war by March. Khomeini guaranteed victory. He didn't get it. Iraq's chemical weapons and air superiority shredded Iranian forces. Iran shifted to a war of attrition, hoping to bleed Iraq dry. In spring 1988, Iraq struck back. Iran lost all gains made since 1983. Saddam chose not to invade Iran, instead offering peace. On July 17, 1988, Iran accepted UN Resolution 598, restoring pre-war borders. Khomeini called it drinking from a chalice of poison. The war was over. Saddam declared victory, parading his troops and boasting of Iraq's might. But Iraq lost hundreds of thousands of men it couldn't replace. It owed billions to Gulf states, especially Kuwait. Saddam's inflated ego led him to invade Kuwait in 1990, triggering the Gulf War. His belief that the West wouldn't intervene again was shattered when coalition forces crushed Iraq in 1991. The Iran-Iraq War left 1 to 2 million dead. A devastated region, a blueprint for future conflicts, from chemical warfare to asymmetric naval battles. It was a war of ambition, ideology, and desperation. And it set the stage for everything that followed, from the Gulf War to modern Middle Eastern geopolitics. Stay tuned for next episode. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, 1990, Saddam's fatal gamble, the road to the Gulf War. Saddam, flush with pride and debt after the Iran-Iraq War, invades Kuwait over oil disputes and unpaid loans. The world reacts with shock, and the U.S. leads a massive coalition to push Iraq out. Includes the infamous Highway of Death, Operation Desert Storm, and the rise of CNN-era warfare. If you love diving into the untold chapters of history with us, from empires and revolutions to wars that shaped the world, then don't miss a beat. Make sure to follow our channel, hit that